Hey guys, welcome back. This is going to be a project video, and in this video we're going to build a boot bag. Now these things are kind of popular. You either use them or you don't. There's not really any in between. If you've got a really nice pair of dress boots or a really nice pair of boots where you're going to an event or something and you want to keep them polished, you kind of want to protect them. Either you're flying somewhere or you're traveling, you just want them protected. These are pretty popular. They're usually made out of some type of canvas, something like that. And I've seen a few leather ones, just kind of doing a little bit of research, but thought I wanted to come up with one that was kind of a unique design. Kind of, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot you can change on them, but I also wanted to make it to where it's something that we as leather craftsmen can use as a gift, like a really special gift for somebody, whether it's Father's Day or maybe a birthday or Christmas, something like that. Something that you can make that usually any cowboy, anybody that's wearing some nice boots, even bankers and lawyers, they want to protect those when they're traveling or when they're doing stuff. This is just kind of a unique gift that we can kind of incorporate into the things that we do as far as leather work goes. And so it's got two compartments in there. We're going to show you how to do that. There is a divider in there. Now I've got a pair of my junky boots in here right now, and so they're made to fit a pair of boots that I have. So you may have to do some adjustments maybe if you're got taller tops or if your boot size is much longer than what mine is. But these will fit. But it's got a divider in there so that the boots are in their own compartment. I've seen these made where it's a single compartment where the boots are just in there together, which is fine. You could certainly do that. I personally think that if you have a pair of boots that need a case like this, a nice case that you'd like to have for a pair of boots, I would probably imagine that they're polished, or at least you don't want them to get scuffed up and they can kind of bang around on each other inside there if they're not separated. So this way they're separated, and I think it works out really good. It's a fun project. I'd say it's probably just a little bit of a step up just because of the seaming that we have to do on here on the gusset system. That's going to be just a little bit different, but it's pretty straightforward when you watch me do that in there. I think you'll be able to get the hang of what's kind of going on there, and how it's a little intimidating, but it's not impossible, right? But it's got a lot of tooling space on here. As you can see, there is a ton of space on here, guys, for tooling and brands. Even one of these just made it rough out with somebody's brand on it would still make a really nice gift. Not super hard to put together, a little bit more time consuming than some of our other projects, but I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a great project to just maybe present to your customers, especially coming up here on Christmas time, where it might make a pretty neat Christmas gift for somebody to receive one of these Christmas morning. We do have a pattern pack for this. If you would like that after you watch the video, you can certainly hit the description down there. We've got a link there for that, and it'll have all the patterns and a bunch of tooling patterns and stuff like we normally do. But let's get started. Let's get one of these built right quick. Okay, so we've gotten all of our parts cut for our boot bag. At this point, we've already got both of our panels. These are the two outside panels of the boot bag, and they are all tooled up. I've done all the finish work. I've done the antiquing, the die work. It's all ready to go. And so we'll set those here for now, and we'll go through some of these parts because there are quite a few parts just to kind of keep it organized here. You're also going to have another panel that's basically this exact same shape as the outside panels. This is going to be the divider panel. This will go in between the two boots. Now, you could definitely do a boot bag using this pattern pack and not do two compartments. I just think if you're going to if you've got a pair of boots that need a boot bag this nice and with this much craftsmanship in a bag for your boots for travel, they're probably going to be a pretty nice pair of boots, and you probably keep those fairly well polished or at least clean. You don't want them banging around and getting scuffed up in there, so that's why I opted to go ahead and do this project with a divider. Now, it's going to make our gussets just a tick more complicated, but I think when you watch us do that, you're going to see that it's not quite that bad. So I'm just using the same material that we cut all our gusset pieces out of, and you should have 4 of these pieces here. The patterns are in there as far as the lengths and measurements, but you should have 4 of these narrower strips, and we went ahead and just used a bell skiver and did some skiving right here, a 1/2 inch wide along one side on each one of these, not both sides. Now, you certainly don't have to do that if you would prefer not to, or if you don't have a bell skiver, it's no problem. You don't have to do that step. I just think it makes a lot nicer gusset when we do that. And so these will be for the zipper piece, where you'll get 2 of these for each compartment, and the zipper will be in between these 2. And so you'll see us put those together in a minute. And then we've got 2, which are the bottom gusset pieces that will join in with the zipper piece once we build that. We've got 2 of those. Now, on this one, you will skive both sides if you opt to skive your edge for your gusset for installation. You will do a 1/2 inch skive on each side of that. Again, don't have to if you don't have a bell skiver. So we've got those, got 2 of those for the littler ones or the narrower ones. Then we've got this piece here, which is going to be for our handle. We're going to build the handle. That'll be a section coming up. Top piece of our handle, and then also our 2 D hangers where we'll put 2 little D's on there to where we can put a handle on this bag so that we can carry it wherever we're going with it or whatever. So that's all the pieces that we're going to have. The next step that we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to set some of these. We're going to have to build the guts is what I call it. We're going to build the entire gusset system with the zippers in it and all that stuff, get our D's ready to install. We might even go ahead and make our handle. We'll see how the steps kind of lay in here in the video, but we're going to do all of that in one session. But before we step away from the outside panels that we have all tooled up and ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and take the tape off of this, and I'm going to do my edge finishing. I'm going to sand these, I'm going to edge them and get them all nice and edged and all that. And then we'll be ready to go ahead and put some dye on these and get these completely ready to install. And that way when we get our gusset system built, we can just put the two together and we'll be on our way out of building this bag and getting it done. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now and get all our edge work done. Okay, so we've gotten our edges done on the outside panels. One thing I want to mention here, when you're doing your edges, you'll notice when I edge those, I did not edge the back side, the inside here. The reason I didn't was because our gusset's going to go inside or get glued on right there, and then so that's where we're going to sew. So I don't want this rounded off too much, because we'll come back in after we sew this up and we'll edge around the inside of that on this shaft leather here once we get the guts in there. So, but sometimes when you do that, so we edged the front end, we didn't edge the back end, and sometimes when you do that, by the time you slick it, you get a little bit of a ridge right there. Right there, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of ridge. So what I'll do now is I'm going to take a number 2 edger, and all I'm trying to do is get that ridge off of there. I'm not trying to really necessarily edge the inside here, because I've got a gusset I'm going to glue on there. And if you do edge it and slick it, that's not an issue. I just think it makes it a little bit nicer, a little bit more professional looking edge if I don't have an indentation where those two pieces meet right here on the inside. So we're just edging just enough off there so it's still fairly flat back here. It's not rounded off, because if you round that off and then your other piece comes in, it can be hard to get that edge off that shaft leather when you go in there and do that, and you end up with a little bit of a feather gap right there that can kind of be a little bit unsightly. So you just want to always be careful if you're gluing stuff up that's needs to fit up flush. Don't edge that inside. And so all I'm doing is catching any kind of little ridge that might be on here. And this is a very small little number 2, just trying to get that little bit of fold over or ridge right there. Okay. Now the one thing we've got to do, we're going to take one of these narrower ones and one of the bottom ones. So this is the zipper gusset, this is your bottom gusset. We're going to go ahead and set these up. Now if you get the pattern pack, it's got all of this marked already. But I would still suggest, if you're worried about it, go ahead and set it up and make sure that you're getting it the way you want it. Like we do in all our videos, we're going to preset our gusset to make sure it fits with the material we chose. So on the pattern, you'll see a couple little nicks or a couple marks on there up here at the top and right here on the outside on the bottom. That is basically where this bottom gusset will start on this side over here and where it'll end over here. So that's where that one's going to go, and then this one will basically go around that, right? And so what we want to do is we want to get these kind of fit together so we know exactly where to line them up. And like I said, the pattern pack already has this marked for us. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to put our pattern on here on this one to show you how I would do that. And I'm going to put a mark right there and a mark right there. And so you can see I've got little cuts in my pattern. I'm just marking right there and right there. That tells me where I'm going to be. So now I can carry that around here. I haven't dyed my edges yet, so we can carry that mark around and just put a mark on the inside. Same on this one. And so now we can take both of these. We're going to take one of these and we're going to glue it up. Since we are going to glue on this, I wouldn't do this with the middle section because we're not going to glue this. We're going to hold this with binder clamps just to hold it together. But on this one, we're going to go ahead and we're going to glue this in anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and glue it in. Now what we want to do is where that mark is on your narrow piece here for your zipper. We want to start this about 3/4 of an inch over our line right here. Okay, just a hair over that. So we'll go ahead and mark that. It's not that critical. You're going to have some overlap. You want to have that going around there, because this one will come here, and then this one will sit on top. And you'll see that when we start assembling, you'll see what I'm talking about, but that's going to sit there, and your zipper will run right in the middle there. And so this bottom one's the one that's got to line up on those marks. But on the narrow one, we're going to glue it on first, and then we're going to bring this one in and glue that on. So we'll get some glue on here right quick. And I'm just going to use just enough glue to hold this on for just a minute, because we're going to pull it right back off. So now we'll take our bottom gusset and do the same thing on one side. At this point, it's not that critical, just pick one. Got that one set for a minute, and this one's probably ready to go. Good enough for what we're doing. And so like I said, I'm gonna let it overhang here at the top. I'm gonna let it overlap our mark about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to put my mark so I can see it. And then we'll just work this around just like if we were installing it. Okay, that's plenty good. Now you can see where our mark is right there, and how much overlap we have. If you don't want that much, you certainly can trim some of that off, but you do need some overlap. So I wouldn't trim off too much, but it isn't going to hurt anything for it to stay in there. We just want to leave it there for right now. And then wherever that mark is, I'm going to put my mark on that, because now we've got an overlap here. And so what I'll do is I'll start up here. And we want to line up the top of this bottom gusset, the wider one, where our glue is. Be sure and use that part. But we want to line that up with that mark. And that will be where that overlaps right there. So you'll see right here where our mark is, where we transferred that from our pattern, from the front end of the bag, and we put that mark here on the zipper gusset. Well, now where this comes over, you can see we've got a little bit of excess. We need this bottom one to end right at that mark. So I'm going to put a mark on here, and we're going to draw a line straight across, and we're going to trim this little bit of excess off. So this is where kind of pre-fitting those gussets real quick takes a little bit of time, but it's going to get it just right so that everything lines up. So we want to be sure that our top gusset is marked, because we're going to need that mark to know where that goes. This one here is lined up with our mark with a little bit of overlap, about 3/4 of an inch of overlap right there. And then this bottom piece is the one we're going to trim off. So we're going to trim just a little bit of that off, and that'll match up just right on that. And so if you've got all those marks on there, now we can take this off, and we know exactly where everything's going to line up. Okay? So we'll go ahead and just pull that off. This is our bottom one. And that's how much we've got to trim off. So we'll get a straight edge here and get this as square as we can on our mark. And then we'll just trim that right off. So now that gusset is the exact length that we need perfectly. So what we'll do is we'll transfer that, what we trimmed off, to this one, because both compartments are going to be the exact same size. So we'll go ahead and line this one up here. There's no reason to pre-fit the bottom on the other panel, because they should be the exact same size. Okay, those are ready to go. So now we'll take this top gusset piece off for our zipper. And now what I want to do is I want to transfer those marks that we made where the overlap is. So those marks, like that top mark where this one came over the top of it right there, we want to transfer that so we know exactly where that is. Okay, so you can see that we've got a mark right there. And we want a mark on the bottom. Now, until we get the zipper built, it really doesn't matter other than left and right which one of these, but I always, if you'll do 3/4 of an inch overlap at the top, so where this one came in on this, right, if you'll do that, then the bottom one's going to be longer. That'll be the one that's at the back of the boot bag there. So now we'll transfer that mark to all 4 other pieces that we have. You want to be real sure that you've got your zipper gussets laid out correctly, okay? Basically, if we look at these upside down so that you can see where our skive is, this is the one that we glued on and marked. Well, you want to have the skived areas to the outside. Our zipper is going to run down the middle, okay? And so we got to figure out which one's our top. So we're going to flip them back over because we've got them facing the right way. You've got the unskived edges together right here in the middle. Well, that's where the zipper is going to go. So now we're just going to flip those over. Now this is the one that we marked here, and we've got our mark there and our mark there. We know that this one is the top of the boot bag because that's the shorter one. A little bit of a longer one, that one's in bottom. It's not that critical, but that's the way we're going to do it, okay? And so then what we'll do is we're going to take our, I've already done it on this one, but we're going to take our straight edge or our square, try to get that as square as possible. And from our mark that we did while it was glued up on the outside panel, we're going to draw our line. Okay, that's going to give us a definite line of where this bottom gusset will overlap the zipper like that. It'll overlap on each end, right at that line, okay? So we've got that. We've got our zipper facing the unskived edges together. Now we can transfer those marks to its partner on the other side, right? So we'll make a mark there and make a mark there. And so now we'll do that. And you could definitely wait to do this till you get your zipper tape in there. I just prefer to mark them now while I'm thinking about it so I can keep everything straight. Because if you mark them the opposite way, where you've got them facing the wrong way, you're going to have, you know, they're going to be different on each end. So you want to mark them together. That's a pair, and now we'll do this pair. And so we'll put them where the skived edges are to the outside. Unskived edges are to the middle. That's going to be where our zipper goes. And so whatever one, which I have this one marked already, well, I'll turn it around so it faces the same as the other one for you guys. So I've got this one marked. There's my line right there, if you can see it in the video, but that's my line up marked. And there's the other one right there. And now we'll transfer that to its partner. Okay, so they're marked. So you want to keep those together. You want to try to keep those together as best possible so they don't get turned around, and you'll know if you're wrong based on where your marks are. So we'll keep those right there. And now we've got to get, is we're going to take this center divider that we have, and we're going to transfer the marks that we had put on here on our pattern, where we marked here and here, where the two gussets overlap and meet. We're going to transfer those to this central gusset, or the centerpiece. Should be the exact same size roughly. And so now I'm going to come in here with my pencil, and I'm going to, on those little ticks, we're going to put a mark there and a mark there. That's our top and bottom, right? Same thing we're working on. Now where those marks are, I'm going to take just a small bite out in a V, just like that right there. Just a little V cut right there. Don't get too deep. Just want enough to where you know where it is. And that's going to help us line everything up on this piece when we go to do it. And since this seam, we're going to turn it inside out. We're going to sew it inside out and then turn it right side out. You're not going to see this seam in the finished bag. So we're able to do that there. We can't do that on these gusset pieces because those edges, they're going to be seen whenever we glue that on. Like you saw us glue it on here, you're going to see that edge. So you don't want to have those little bites out of there for lineups on there. We're just going to use mark. Just do it to this one and call it good. So now we've got to build the guts. So we've got this ready to go. These outside panels, they're good. We don't need those anymore for right now. We just need this. The first thing we've got to do is build our zipper. Okay, so we've got some zipper tape here. I've got this tool here from Maker's Leather Supply, which is to bust out the teeth on these zippers so that we can sew across the zipper tape without hitting teeth. It's also going to be a good way to put in our stop, where we're going to put our stop in. And then I've got some slides as well as a couple bottom stops. And these are this zipper tape is the really good ones for Maker's Leather Supply. So it's a really nice smooth glide zipper. Works really good. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to take one of our gusset pieces here and determine the length of the zipper that we need. We're basically going to go from the end of our gusset to the other end, okay? So all we're going to have to do is just mark where we want to cut this and how that's going to go. We're just going to take a permanent marker and just mark out or black out the teeth you want to bust out. And so what I'm going to do on this end here is we're going to bust out the teeth basically right at our mark of where that top end is going to be. We're going to take a few of those out. And I want to take enough out to get one of those stops in there, as well as be able to sew across this here when we come in with our overlap. So that's going to be about, let's see, 2, 4. We'll probably don't need them. We'll probably go ahead and take out 6 sets of teeth right there. And so we'll put this on our anvil. We'll take our tool, just simply put it right over the teeth there, and it'll bust them right off. Okay. So as you can see there, now we've got a hole in our teeth there. So these teeth do have a direction on any zipper that you're working with. The slide will run one way, okay? So depending on whether you want this bag to be closed with the zipper down at the bottom on the back side, or when it's closed, it's at the top up by the handle, that's up to you. I'm gonna do this one where it's at the top by the handle when it's closed. When the zipper is closed, this is the top of our zipper slide, or our zipper area. This slide will be at the very top of the bag by the handle. Not sure if that's your preference or not, but if you want it the other way, you can turn it around. But look at the teeth and know that you've got it facing the right direction. Usually there's a bump on the tooth that'll tell you which direction it's running when you're closing it. And so we're gonna put that there. That's gonna be right at that mark. And now we'll come down here. What I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna bust these teeth out where we need to cut it. And I'm just knocking out just enough to where then I can come in there with some scissors and cut that tape. Sometimes you gotta grab a little pair of pliers just to get it out of there. And now I can get my shears and just cut the tape. Okay, save that tape for the next one because we're gonna need 2. So then we'll check, make sure we're good. Might have to bust a few more little teeth out right there, just so that we know when we sew that overlap, we're not gonna hit those. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. I'm gonna bust out another little set just to be safe. Don't want to hit these teeth with your machine. You will break needles. So now we'll have enough room for a stop as well as to sew through there. And now we'll take our permanent marker and we're gonna do the same thing on this end as far as keeping that out of the way of where we're gonna sew, as well as putting a stop in. And I'm taking away 8 or 10 sets of teeth right there. There's no reason for them to be there anyway. We're just want to make sure we got enough room. Okay. Okay, so we've gotten our zippers cut to length, and we've busted the teeth out that we don't need so that we can sew across there and so that we can put our stops in. I've gone ahead and put together one of the zippers just to kind of show you what we're after. And so we've put one of these bottom stops on the bottom end there, and that looks like that little guy there. And all it is just a little brass stop that goes in there. You want that at the back of the slide, so as you open the zipper, the back side or the bottom of the zipper slide has somewhere to butt up to. So that zipper can't come untracked. You can get a good seat on that stop, and that zipper's fastened together. Then on the top, we're going to use these little stops here, which are top stops. That's what I call those. I'm pretty sure that's what the proper name for them, but that you want to use at where the zipper closes to, and that way it can close completely. You could use a bottom stop there if you decide to. The problem is it'll create a pucker right there like that, and the zipper can't close completely. So you're going to want to use those little crimped ones. If you buy these zipper slides, they usually come with both, so that you can make your own zipper and to whatever length that you need it. And so that's our zipper there put together. So I'm gonna show you real quick how to put this together. And so we've got our two pieces here. Remember, it's the unskived area that faces the zipper. The skived area is facing the panels. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and put our zipper on here, zipper slide. And the way I do that is you're gonna wanna go ahead and open that up some. Take your zipper pull. Now they make a tool. Aaron at Maker's Leather Supply has a really cool tool. We have one in the shop, but I'm gonna show you how to do it without it, because you don't necessarily have to have that tool. But I'm gonna go past where those teeth are at that we don't really need, and we're just gonna pull that through the slide. Now here's where you wanna kind of try to fiddle with it a little bit to get it lined up so that it tracks the way you want it to. This really comes more into play when you're on other types of bags, and we just want to separate that zipper all the way now. And now that slide is on there, and we just want to make sure that they come together evenly at the top. If they come together and they're really off, you know, one side's further out or further in than the other, then you're going to want to untrack it, start it over, and try to get these lined back up best you can, and that way it'll track evenly, right? You don't want it this way, you know, crooked. So now we've got that slide. If you go all the way off with it, it's not a big deal. Just gonna have to come back and do it again. But we'll stop it about right there. And now we'll take our bottom stop. We're gonna put this on there. If you look at a zipper tape, it's got a little thicker area, weaved area here where those teeth are. With this stop, you wanna be on the outside of that little edge ridge, and then just push that through that webbing. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a bear to get it through there, but it should pop through. You can even put it down on a little rubber mallet or a rubber pad. Just drive it in there. Okay. You should have all 4 teeth sticking out of that zipper. And then you can use pliers or whatever you want to use, but you want to get them started going towards the center. So you want to crimp it with your pliers to where they at least get started. Then I like to take our little anvil and then a small tack hammer and just real gently crimp those all the way over. Don't mess up your teeth. You just want to crimp it down where it looks really nice like that. Now when that zipper comes back, it's got something to butt up to, and the zipper can't come untracked. Okay, so now these up here, we want to go ahead and put these on, and all they do is you just pop it on right there above the teeth. I'll take these side cutters, and just crimp that on. Okay, one on each side. You don't want to mangle them up, but you want to crimp them enough that they're not going to fall off. Now all this is going to be sewn in, so the likelihood of this thing coming untracked is pretty slim. But we just want to be sure we do what we can so we don't have to go back in later and undo a zipper and try to fight that, trying to get everything put back together. So there's our zipper. It's ready to go. Now technically we don't need any of these teeth right here. You can cut those out and do whatever you want with those. If you wanted, you can come in here and just cut those teeth off. That webbing right there is actually doing nothing. So if you'd prefer to not even have them in there, you can certainly do that. It's completely up to you. I usually just leave them in there, but you can certainly, you know, if you don't want them in there, just cut them out. I usually will go in and cut them out after I get the guts put together and everything's ready to go. Okay, so now our zippers are ready. We know where our top is, we know where our bottom is, or you know where we're going to be on this. So we want to be sure to install that correctly. And what I'm going to do is put some tape on the zipper. Usually you can go either way. You can put it on the leather or you can put it on the zipper. It's whatever you want to do. I usually just go along the edge of the zipper, the outer edge with this tape. If you don't have this tape, it's just double-sided tape. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it from Maker's Leather Supply, wherever you want. Springfield probably sells it. But I will use glue in a pinch if you don't have tape. Glue will work. It's just a little more cumbersome to deal with. Okay, now this is where where it comes down to when you're building your boot bag. If you want the zipper, like we talked about earlier, if you want it to, when it's closed, the zipper pulls being towards the top of the bag by the handle, or if you want them back here on the back of the bag, right, at the bottom. That's completely up to you on how you set this up. I'm going to set mine up to where my zippers, they will be right here on the top basically, and not down here on the bottom. That's just how I'm doing it. You can do it whatever way you want. That's always a question when we do bags. Which way should the purse open? Which way should the bag open, you know, or close? And so, but I'm going to do it this way. And so now we'll just remove our double-sided tape. If you cut your fingernails, you usually have a problem trying to get that off. And now we'll just take this, and we want to set this where you've got a little bit of spacing for that slide to cruise down the zipper without getting bound up in the leather. And you probably can't see it in the video, but when you're using a zipper or zipper tape, there's another stitch that runs a little off those teeth. The length of the zipper tape, it's just a part of the weave that nylon is. And I will usually just use that as my line. And that'll usually give you the proper spacing here in the middle. But you can just eyeball it. It's not that critical. You just want to keep yourself enough room to stitch down, obviously. So that when we go along the side here, we'll stitch that zipper tape down. But also, we've got room for the slide to pass without hitting the leather. So we'll glue that on. We'll spin her around here. We'll get this tape off. Do the same thing. Now here, when you do the offside, don't pay attention to your zipper tape as much. You want to pay attention more to this leather panel, because you want to be directly across from there. So I kind of set it up to where those mark lines are directly across from each other, as square as we can keep it. So that's our zippered gusset area. And so if you want to check, should be pretty close to 5 inches wide, because that is what our bottom gusset is. So they should be about the same size. Okay, if it's way off, you might have left too much space in between the zipper here. So you might have to take it off and then bring it in closer so it's the same width. This is a 5-inch gusset, and so this should end up being roughly a 5-inch gusset. Okay, you can have a little bit of play there, but not much. You want it pretty well close to the same width as your other gusset, because these two got to match up. So you might just check that to make sure. But now we've got a zipper piece. It's the right length. We've got our marks for our overlap, because like I said, this will come in and overlap right there. And then we'll sew across here, making it a full loop, right? Making our gusset. I'm going to get this other zipper put together, then we'll be ready to sew those zippers in, and then we can move forward on that. Okay, so both our zippers are ready, so now we'll go to the sewing machine and we'll just sew us a line down there on each side, get those zippers sewn in, we'll be ready to go. Okay, so we've gotten our zipper sewn in, as you can see there, nice and sewn in. So that is a completed zippered gusset right there. We're ready to go. It's the same width as our bottom gussets. And so now we're ready to just do our overlap. So we'll just grab one here. On the bottom, it doesn't matter which end you use, okay? That's wherever you want to do it, it's fine. Just grab one. And we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to cut these teeth off just because I don't want a chance hitting them with my machine. So I'm just going to cut that out. They're not serving any purpose down there. So we'll just cut those off. Plus, if you ever look inside the bag, you won't see those teeth hanging out in there. And so we're ready to go there. So now what we'll do is we're just going to overlap on our marks that we have here. We're going to overlap that at that mark. And so what we want to do is I'm going to put some tape just right along this edge. All we're trying to do is hold it in place while we sew it. These bottom teeth are serving no purpose, and they'll look a little unsightly on the inside, so we'll take some scissors and we'll just cut right up against those teeth and just cut that portion off. There's no reason for those to be in there, and we don't want a chance. We've left ourselves enough room by busting those teeth out, but we don't want a chance hitting those with our needle. So we'll go ahead and just remove those. Okay. And now we'll take, and you just take one of these and then take your bottom gusset, the wider one. Doesn't matter which end you use. I've already got double-sided tape right here along the edge of one end of it. And we're just going to overlap on our lines that we have. We have marks where this overlap needs to be so that we have the right circumference. And so you want to get that as matched up to the other one as possible, width-wise and on your mark. And so when we go over to the machine, all we're going to do is sew a line right across here. And that's going to join these two together. And I'm going to go ahead and tape up the other side. And that way, when we go to the machine, they're ready to go. I can sew all the overlaps, all the junctions, and we'll be ready to start installing these gussets. Okay, so now we've got a full loop. That is a completed gusset. We just got to sew those junctions. I'll get this other one prepped up, and we'll go to the sewing machine and sew those up. Okay, so we've got our gussets put together. One thing you want to be careful with, when I was putting this one together, I had a little bit of a gap where this stop came in. Might have had our zipper a little bit too far to the left or too far down a little bit, because we are kind of overlapping our bottom stop down here. So we maybe should have shifted, but I got to go off our marks, right? The good thing with the leather selection that you do, whatever leather that you decide to use, that's why we talk about pre-fitting our gussets instead of just trusting the pattern, which is what we talked about early on when we kind of mocked this thing up, is because the leather I chose has quite a bit of stretch to it. It's got some give to it. It's not super, firm. And so we've got a little bit of play there. So I was able to kind of bring this overlap about that much ahead of where my actual marks were that we marked when we mocked this guy up to this, right? And that shouldn't affect us when we go to put these gussets in, because this leather has enough stretch. But that's something to contend with when you're selecting your gusset material. If yours is stretchier than mine, that's why I always say don't trust my pattern, because yours may stretch more as you're putting that gusset in, especially if you're pulling it as you're installing it. And then if it's real dense and it's not very stretchy, or it's a lot more firm, you're not going to be able to stretch it. So it needs to be more precise, because you're not going to have that give or that leeway in there. So that's just something to consider. A lot of times we look at all these leathers, we don't know why we want a certain kind, but you'll learn as you build more why you shouldn't have chose that real firm leather when you've got to turn a bag inside out or right side out when build it backwards, right? You'll figure out that leather is really hard to turn around, versus if you build something that needs some substance and you build it out of too soft a leather, the bag wants to cave in and fall on itself. So different applications, different purposes. That's where your leather selection comes in, and all it takes is just getting more experience with more and more leathers and learning that as you go along. But I just wanted to address that. We did have a little bit of a gap right there. Be sure your zipper your zipper slide stops at your line, so that if you've got your zipper kind of cattywampus a little bit in there, you can kind of get it straightened back up. But not a big deal with this leather. We've got enough stretch to it. These are exactly the same size still. So we're good to go. So we'll go to the machine, we'll sew those across there, and then we'll be ready to install them. Okay, so we've gotten our gussets completely made, and so now we're going to install these. Now this is going to be a little bit of a trick because we're going to install both the gussets to the center panel at the same time. And you'll see how that's going to work out once we get it all sewn up. But if you just kind of follow me here, this is going to work out. But what we're going to do is you're going to turn one of them inside out, one of the gussets inside out like this, and then one of them right side out. And you want to be sure that you've got your bottoms on the same side and your slides on the same side, okay? So what you're going to do is we're going to take this one that's inside out, and then we're going to drop the one that's right side out into it. Now that's going to basically put them face to face, just like if you were building a bag, you would have these grain to grain. And that way when you turn it around, you're showing the grain on both of them, okay? So you kind of stay with me there. And then what we want to do is they should fit inside each other. They're exactly the same size. You're going to want to line up your overlap. So where that overlap is that we sewed on, you're going to want to line those up, okay? And you need to know where your pull is or where your slide is, okay? They're right here. And so that's going to be, for my bag, I'm going to do this where when it's closed, the slide is at the top. So on our center section, remember we put took them little bites out, that little nick right there. That is where those overlaps need to line up based on the pattern. So we're just going to start there. The zipper is going to run down. If you look at this pattern, zipper is going to run down the back side of the bag. So the toe of the boot is to the front. There's no zipper over there. It just runs down the back side. Okay, so we're going to turn this in. That's the only thing to keep in mind. Keep it kind of all straight as you start pinning this together. And I'm going to line up my overlaps right here as close as I can get them, and you want them flush as you can, okay? As we put all these gusset pieces together, we just want them to be flush. There's no overhang, there's no feather, everything just lines up. And now I'll take that nick that we put in that pattern and I'll put that right on that overlap. The V of that nick is right there at that overlap. We'll get all that set the way we want it. We're going to start there. And then we're going to take a good binder clip, clip that in place. We don't want that to move. Okay, and now we're going to do the same with the bottom nick that's on the back side of the bag. And we're going to go ahead and line up the bottom here. You may end up with a little bit of slack up here. It'll all work out as we get to pinning this together. Okay, so we'll line up the overlaps on the back. And then we're going to put that nick on the bottom in the same spot where that V is, right there on that overlap. Now, as far as your center section, it doesn't really matter whether you're showing the rough out or the grain out. It doesn't really matter. It's going to be rough out in one section and grain in the other section. So you don't really have to worry about it. You just want to put it in correctly. And now we've got those two main areas pinned down where we want them. Now we can start working around the bag, and we're just going to line up and pull and get everything, all these gusset pieces, lined up to where they're proper. You're going to need a lot of binder clips for this. I don't recommend using glue, and the reason is because you'll see the glue no matter what you do in your seam. I don't care where you put it. By the time you turn this inside out or right side out, you're going to see your glue somewhere. So I'd rather just fight the binder clips and use those. And we're not trying to pull or distort, we're just trying to pin it up. Coming around these corners is going to be just a little bit tricky, but just get it in there where it lays nice. The nicer you prep this up, the nicer it'll sew. I like these little pink ones Claudia got, but they're not super strong. So I'm using the binder clips anytime I get to a corner so that it'll do a real nice job of holding that for me. And you might have a little pucker here or there in your corners. Anytime you're making a corner, just try to get it as smooth as possible where it's not a big knot, and that way the machine can lay that down as you're sewing it. And again, the edges of all three layers should be as flush along the top as you can, and that way everything lines up well, and it's going to keep your seam even. Okay, now I've got a little bit of gather right here, right? So you're going to have a little bit, you think, oh, it's too long, it's not enough. Just don't work so tight. So we'll come about midway down and we'll get all this lined up. It's a lot easier to work out a little bit of gather than it is a whole lot in a small spot. So if we can get it over some range, we can begin to work some of that out. So now we just start working around the rest of the bag. Like I said, you want a good binder clip at those junctions right there so that those overlaps stay real straight, because you don't want them off if you can help it. Now in this toe area, this is where skiving all this really helps. So you can just kind of work that down in there, get it as even as you want, as you can. It's going to be a little snug in there, but it'll go on around. If you got some slack, you need to back it out some. You can take a couple clips off, work that toe area first with some smaller binder clips. so that you don't have such large wrinkles in there, puckers in there. That'll be really hard to sew. Okay, so we've got our gusset, or our divider in there. We've got our two gussets on. When we flip it out, you're going to be grain to grain, or grain exposed. And like I said, it just takes a little bit of patience, just working around, and that's why we pre-fit those gussets. And that way we should be pretty dang close to where everything just lines up. You may have to work out a few wrinkles, especially in this toe area. Like I said, if you get cluttered up over here in this toe area and you got a lot of wrinkles, back some clips off, pull some of those out and get them smooth inside that toe so you don't have any puckers in there whenever we sew this up. If the more wrinkles you have, the more of those little overlaps and little your seam's going to look kind of funny in there. So get that area smoothed out and then work that slack back this way. It's a lot easier to get it out on a straight run than it is to get it out inside a curve like that. So now that's all pinned up, and so now we'll go over to the sewing machine and we will begin to slowly sew this up, taking our time, making sure all our layers are lined up, remain lined up as we sew, and removing clips as we go along. So we'll go over to the sewing machine now and we'll do that. Okay, so we got our gusset sewn. So as you can see there, went around there, you just got to take your time. Just be careful, take your time, go easy. If you're using a bell knife skiver, I tried my best to stay as close to this skive line as possible. That's a good mark there for when you're sewing to kind of keep your spacing. The closer you keep that, the more even you keep that, the nicer your seams will look. And so now we're just going to take this and we're going to flip the seam out on this one side. So the outside one, you should just be able to flip that out and see what we've got. Okay, so you want to try your best to keep these two overlaps as even as possible. We've got them pretty close. This one could be down just a hair. Check our back seams. Those look pretty good. Those are pretty straight across. But that is our guts. So as you can see, we've got now a compartment on this side here with a divider in there, and then on the other side another compartment with that divider. So that's going to create two different little compartments for each boot, one for each boot. It makes a nice seam. Now you could certainly put a piping in there if you wanted to pipe and seam this instead of just doing it the way I did, but I think this is plenty nice the way this is done. But you could definitely put a welt in there. It's going to be a little bit more cumbersome to deal with, but it can be done. And so that's our guts for our boot bag. Those are completely built. And so now it will be a normal gusset setup when we put this panel on there. We'll glue the inside around here where we skived. We'll glue around the inside of our outside panel and we'll mount that on there, and that will inset that gusset system within each panel, and that will finish us up. Before we do that though, we've got to build a handle because we've got to do our D hangers. I'm going to put some D's in here, I'll show you in a minute, Okay, so we're going to build the handle, and we're going to have this piece here that we cut out. Now I did go ahead and skive this. You don't have to if you don't want to, but it's just going to fold a lot nicer. We're going to bring this in, as you'll see in a minute. This will come around. That's where our D will hang right there. And then on this other end, you'll notice one end is a little bit narrower. That is going to be for the snap that we're going to put on there so that we can just quickly disconnect one side when we're getting boots out of it. The D's that I'm using, as well as the snap, are from Buckle Guy, and these are 1-inch solid brass D's, and then a 3/4 inch little snap. Pretty nice little snap there. Just going to look real nice on there. So we've got the base of our strap, and then we've got the top. This piece, as you'll see in a minute, will go on top there, and then we've got our two little pieces here. The original ones I cut out were just a little too shallow, so I did make a new pattern. It is updated on the pattern pack. But what I did was just skive this down so that it doesn't create a big lump. But what we're going to do is glue them and put these D's in there. And so we're just going to take a little bit of glue and just put us some glue there. And go ahead and glue these D's into these hangers. And that way we've got them. Okay, so we'll let those set up for a second. And then on this, we're going to go ahead and just put glue all over. Don't have to do this piece just yet. We just want to get a little coat of glue on this. Okay, we'll let that set up. We're going to let this glue kick just a little bit, and then we'll come back and put this stuff together. Okay, so we're going to take these, and our D's are going to hang in that little notch right there on these hangers. Want to line those up best you can. We'll hammer those down just a little bit to where they're nice and tight up against the D. And I'm going to take and just nip off that little corner, just so it doesn't show up on our bag. Okay, and so those are ready. And now what we'll do, actually, all right, so I'm mistaken. You need to go ahead and glue this right here. Go ahead and glue the whole thing, because we're going to mount the D and the little snap before we fold the outside edges. So we'll give that just a second to kick right quick, but yes, go ahead and just glue the whole thing when you glue it up. And that way that's ready to go. We'll fold that over first, and that way that can glue down. Okay, so now we'll take our snap, and we're going to put that snap on there just to where it starts to get a little bit wider right there, and then we'll fold that over, and we'll glue that down. Okay, then on this end we need a D on there, so we'll do the same thing there. Fold that over about yay much. Okay, so your strap should look like that at this point. You got a D on one side, snap on the other. This snap will snap to that D, and that way we can detach and flip the handle out of the way. And so now what we'll do is we're going to bring this in towards the middle, right at our skive line. You want to keep it as even as you can. You want to try to maintain that width of that strap. This piece now will sew right on top of that, and that will make our handle. Okay, so get that in there. If you've got a little too much right there, you can take and just cut just a hair off of that. Not too much, just cut you a little bit off there. There's a lot of different ways to make handles. You can make whatever handle you prefer when you do this bag. but I find these style of handles work pretty nice and they look real nice. And that little piece ought to fit right on there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of wider double-sided tape right down the middle of this top piece. And we'll just glue that or tape that down right down the middle. Kind of give it a little bit of a bend there. Alright, and that handle's ready to sew. So we'll go to the sewing machine now and we'll just sew around this top piece and that'll sew it in place. Okay, so we've gotten the strap sewn up. It's ready to go. We've got the D on this side and the snap on this side. I went ahead and put a piece of double-sided tape right there on the top. We'll mount that D. I've already mounted this D here to show you where it's going to go. We just got it mounted on the inside of the outside panel. And you can put the strap, you know, on either side, whatever side you want to put it on. I just doing it this way. But we're just going to measure. So we got to figure out where it's going to go on the top. We're just going to center that up. So I'm going to come over here and we're just going to measure. It's roughly 7 inches across the width of this leg here, and so we're just going to come straight up at 3.5 and put a mark, and that's going to be where the center of this D needs to set. So it needs to set right there in the middle. So we're just going to pull this tape off and we'll lay that strap out. Make sure you got it running the right direction, and we're just going to center that D on that mark. Okay. And then we'll beat that down. So now we've got that D mounted. So we've got our handle, we've got our D's for our handles, and that handle right there will just snap when it's on the bag. It'll snap right across there, and that'll give us a nice little handle to carry the bag. So now these are ready to go. Now I haven't put dye on the edges of this yet. You could go ahead and dye the edges on these panels if you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and wait and just do it whenever we put the gusset system in, because I may go through there with a small edger and just edge some of this material off so that it's nice and rounded. And when I do that, it might get a little color change, and so I'll just hit that with dye to finish it off real nicely. And so now we're ready to go ahead and install our guts, or our gusset area, the inside of the bag. And so we're just going to go ahead and start putting some glue and get one panel glued on. Then we'll get the other panel glued on and we'll be able to be ready to sew all this up. Okay, so just to keep everything lined up, we're going to go ahead and mark this panel, both of our panels, where those overlaps are for our gusset, basically where the zipper goes, right? So we're going to go ahead and mark that there. We're going to mark this one, and that way we can line everything up, keep everything square. Okay, and I'm going to carry that across there so I know where we're supposed to glue those overlaps. So those overlaps, one will start there and one will come to here. Okay, that's going to help us to stay as square as possible as we go. We've already marked this one because we had prepped our gusset there. So we're just going to check those, make sure they're still where they need to be. And so we'll go ahead and get this side glued up first. And here I'm going to put just a little bit of tape right there to hold that gusset down where we need it there, because that glue's not going to stick to that shaft leather very well. So we're just going to put a little piece of double-sided tape right there. Okay. And then all the way around this, it should glue up. This leather will glue up really nicely. So I'm just going to go along here. Okay, so we'll let that dry just a little bit. And now we'll decide or we'll pick out the side, you know, where this has to go. So this one's going to be the left side. So we're going to glue this side of the gusset up. Doing the same thing. We're just putting glue right where we skived. Okay, so we'll let that glue dry for just a minute, and then we'll go ahead and glue that gusset piece on. Okay, so our glue is set up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our panel. Make sure you got the right panel on the right side, right? We've got our marks here. So we're going to start with this top overlap right here, just like we did on the center panel. We want that overlap to hit right at that line. And so we're just going to, I've got the mark right there where the top is, and I'm going to just set that overlap right on my mark. And you can go a little bit around. You don't need to leave a whole bunch of feather or anything. It's pretty well the correct size, so you can just match it up with your edge all the way around on your gusset. Just don't pull your gusset too much. You want it to kind of lay in there. Okay, it's nice and flush along the edge. Now we'll spin around and we'll do this mark, and I'm going to go ahead and line up this overlap, the outside overlap, not the inside. So we don't care about this one. We don't care about the one on the inside, okay? It's the one on the outside that we care about. We want that one lined up with our mark. Okay. And now we can start walking our gusset around there. Remember, don't pull it and stretch your leather up too much. You just want to lay it on there. If you get to pulling it, you're going to start gaining too much, and then you're going to have too much excess in areas, especially in corners and things. You want it fairly flush. And before we get too far into here, I need to pull that little piece of tape right there that we put in there. Okay. And now we can just work that gusset around the corners nice and easy. When you come across this D, if anything, be sure you're out a little bit more than you need to be, so that when you sew over that, you'll catch that. If you try to get it too spot on, you might miss it with your machine. I'd rather have it a little bit too tight than have you miss it, because you're not going to be able to see that when you go to sew that. Okay, so we got the top there. Now we'll work our way around down towards the toe of the boot. And I'm going to switch to this side and get this corner done some. The corners and tight radiuses are the areas that you've got to worry. The straight runs are a lot easier to adjust. So always work those on any gusset that you're doing. Be sure you get those corners set where you want them, because that's where the machine's going to pull the most tension. And so I'm going to come over here now and do this toe. If I've got to back it off, I will, just to get that nice where we want it. So there's one panel on. Okay. And you just want to make sure it looks nice and even. You don't have any big puckers or anything around there. Like I said, if you'll concentrate on these tighter radiuses here and your corners, getting your marks set, right? We got our overlap here set on our line. We've got our overlap over here set on our line, and then we work in between those points. That'll be a lot easier to get everything kind of set up where you want it. And then I like to go through there and just give it A little tap, just to make sure that our glue is set where we need it and well. So now we're going to go ahead and sew this one side, just to go ahead and get one side sewn. We're going to go ahead and go to the machine now, and we'll set up our gauge and everything, and we'll go ahead and sew this in place. Okay, so we got one panel sewn on. You can see inside the bag, we've got a compartment there, got a divider, so everything's working out. Now we just got the only thing we got to do now is sew on our next panel and then a little bit of finish work. So we're going to do the exact same thing with our second panel here, and we'll get it glued on, get it sewn up, and this bag will be almost done. All right, so we've gotten both panels sewn on. This bag is all together and ready to go. The only thing I'm going to do now is we need to still put some dye on these edges. You don't necessarily have to, but we're going to, and I've already started here, but I'm going to take a number 2. This is a Berry King edger here. This specific type here works really well for doing this little task, but what we're going to do is just go along on the inside of the gusset there where we've sewn that on, and we're just going to take and edge that a little bit, and that's going to just round that corner just a little bit, and then that way when we do our finish work on our edges, that will look more professional and cleaned up there. You won't have any kind of little pieces wanting to flip up or anything like that. So we'll just go around here. We'll undo this strap. When you get here to this D, just be very careful. Don't cut your D off. And I like to trim that just right around that D right there with that edger. Just be careful, because you can get into that material that's holding our D in place. Okay, so we've gotten all that edged, and this bag is ready to go. All we're going to do now is I might go ahead and just dye that. You could go back with your Tokonole if you wanted to, since this is a bag type leather, which is the only time I really recommend using Tokonole would be on bag leather type stuff, chrome tan leathers. I wouldn't use that necessarily for me. Personally, I don't like it on veg tan leathers, but you could put something on that. We're going to just go ahead and dye that because it's very thin. We skive that down, so there's really no need to go do that. And then I will hit that with some tan coat. We'll do a little freshen up coat, and that'll slick down that edge, and we'll wipe it down, and that'll take care of that little bit of chap leather edge that's right there. But if you wanted to go ahead and finish that off, you sure could re-slick all of that. You could also wait and do all of your edging until it's done, but I find that you're not going to get as nice of a edge when you try to do this when the bag is already built. So I'd rather just go ahead and do that little bit at the end and do the bulk of it when it's on there. So I'll get a dye pen. We're just going to go along there and dye those edges right quick. Now I put just a touch of dye inside this little cup here so that we can get this little area right here. We should be real careful, and we'll just paint that in so it doesn't stand out. Just that little bit of shap leather right there. And then we can go ahead and pull that back just a little bit. And get that too. All right, so now we'll just take our tan coat, and I'm just going to give this just a little final wipe down. I'm going to start with my edges and just wipe those down so they shine. We're also going to put some tan coat on the bag leather. Just going to give it a little bit of luster. Go ahead and get the outside. If you are doing this and you used black dye for your edges, do the edges absolute last. Because you will streak that dye throughout your rest of your panels. The brown doesn't seem to do it as bad, but that black dye will run. So you want to do those by themselves. Throw the pad away when you're done. And you don't have to do this step. I just like to give it a little added shine. Okay. We'll let that dry for just a minute. All right, guys, so that's building the boot bag. As you can see, there's quite a few steps in there. It's not the easiest project to build, but it's not impossible. Like I said, the gusset system, or what we call the guts in here, this is going to be probably the hardest part, is just getting these kind of situated, getting your zippers made, getting everything lined up, pre-fitting your gusset. I would recommend doing that to make sure that the material you picked is going to match and actually fit the panels. We do have all the measurements and marks inside the pattern pack, but again, anytime we do any type of bag work in here on this channel, I'm always going to advise you give it a run and pre-fit that gusset to make for sure that you got everything where you need it to be, so that when you go to glue up, everything lines up and ends up square and true the way you want it. But great project, great step-up project. If you've done a few bags, if you've done a backpack or a duffel bag, things like that, a little bit more complicated, I don't think you'll have any trouble with one of these. Like I said, you've seen the canvas ones. A lot of people have these. My wife has a couple of these bags for some real nice boots she has, and I thought this would be just a fun deal that's just kind of unique. It's kind of like a rope bag. You don't need a super expensive, heavily tooled rope bag to haul your ropes in, but it sure is cool when you got one and it's hanging there. So if you're walking through the airport with one of these, it's going to catch some eyes. And so I think as a gift or a potential project for you to offer to your customers, it's a great deal. Is a full pattern pack for this. All the measurements, all the shapes, a bunch of tooling patterns in there. You can go ahead and check that out. There's a link down in the description for that one. Material packs, don't know if we're going to do those. It eats up quite a bit of leather, because it's this area on this tooling wise has a lot more tooling than you really think it is, just kind of watching the video. But once you lay something out and get it on your bench, you can have a lot of fun on there. It's a big canvas. You can fit a lot of things on there, really make them unique. So hope y'all enjoyed the project. Give it a shot. Even if you're kind of new to leatherwork and you've built a bag or two and you're kind of worried, I think you can get through this. It's not too difficult. It's just a little bit more challenging, but I think it's a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy it. Give it a shot. I appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to go to dgsaddlery.com, sign up for the Leathercraft newsletter, and we will see y'all in the next project video.